Hi, I'm Davin from Brewbitz.com, and behind the camera we've got James. Say hello, James. Right, today we're going to be making nectarine wine, because I was quite lucky when I was down Asda the other day. There was a man selling them for 10p a punnet, and I just couldn't turn that down. So I got 50p's worth, which turned out to be £7.5. So I've got enough here to make 12 bottles of wine. But I'm going to show you the ingredients for 6. So what do we need? Well, first of all, let's start off with 3 pounds of nectarines, 3 pounds of sugar. We've got some yeast nutrient, some pectolase, some Camden tablets, and some sodium metabisulfate, and we're going to use that for our sterilising. We also then need a thermometer, high hydrometer. We'll need a trial jar to use with our hydrometer, spoon, our simple siphon, our straining bag or muslin. We've got a jug, we've got our demijohn and bubbler, and we've also got our bucket. Right, let's get making our nectarine wine. The first thing we need to do with our nectarine wine is take our nectarines, and we need to half them because we need to take the stone out. So, literally, pop it open, stone will pop out like that, and pop it into the bowl. You can see I've already done quite a few already. So, whilst I'm going to finish off the rest of these, so why don't you come back in a few moments. Now we've got all our nectarines chopped up, we're going to put them into a sterilised bucket. Okay, and we're going to add now our boiling water. Now, if you are just using 3 pounds of nectarines, you will be using 6 pints of boiling water. So, I need to boil my kettle again. So, why don't you come back in a few moments and we'll add the sugar together. Now, because I'm doing 12 bottles, I had to add 12 pints of boiling water. So it's taken me a bit of time, but we've now got our peaches. Stay there for me, James, because I'm now going to add my sugar. Lovely. Sugar goes in, and remember this is very, very hot. So what we're now going to do is stir it until all the sugar is dissolved. It takes a few moments, and then what we've got to do is we've got to wait for it to cool down to about 20 degrees, and then we can add our pectolase and we can add our Camden tablet. So it's going to take a bit of time before it's ready to add those, so we will see you shortly. It's taken a bit of time for our nectarines to cool down to 20 degrees, and now I've taken a sample of our juice and I'm using our hydrometer, and I can see that the specific gravity is coming out at 1.104. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some pectolase, and pectolase, I'm going to add a teaspoon per teaspoon per gallon. So literally just plonk it in there. Now of course I'm doing 2 gallons, so I'm going to need 2 teaspoons worth. Excellent. Now pectolase, what this does is when you put boiling water onto fruit, it can release something called pectin. Now when you're trying to clear the wine, pectin can cause a haze and make it almost impossible to make your wine really, really clear. So what we do is we add the pectolase now, and that's an enzyme, and it basically breaks down the pectin, so it eliminates that problem later on. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to add a Camden tablet. And the way we add a Camden tablet, as this is literally a tablet, is we get a teaspoon, we get a second teaspoon, and we put them on top of there, and we wiggle away, pressing together, and eventually it starts to go. And we're going to add the Camden tablet in. Okay, so the Camden tablets releases a small amount of sulfur dioxide. And this sulfur dioxide sits just above the wine, and that helps stop any bacteria or any bugs getting down into the must and spoiling it. Okay, come and have a quick look, James, at our nectarines, because they've swollen up slightly. What we're going to do is give it all a good stir in. Lovely. Right, we're now going to put this in a warm place, and we're going to keep stirring it for the next 3 days. And then we're going to come back 3 days later and we're going to put our yeast nutrient in for it to start fermenting. So we'll come back tomorrow and we'll give it a stir, come back another day, we'll give it a stir, come back third day, give it a stir, and we'll then add some yeast. For 3 days now, the nectarines have been in my boiler room and I've been stirring them every day, and they're gradually starting to break down. You might want to come in and have a look at this, James, before I stir it. Do you see how much they have actually broken down and changed? So what we're going to do with this now is we're going to take this to the kitchen and we're going to add our yeast, and then we'll be putting it back into here to ferment properly for another week or so. So we'll see you in the kitchen. It's time to add our yeast and our yeast nutrient to our nectarine must. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of yeast for every gallon that we've used. Now remember, I've got 2 gallons in here, so I'm going to need to use 2 teaspoons of yeast. And I'm also going to add in our yeast nutrients, and in this case we are using vitamin B1 tablets, and these are tiny little tablets. Come on in, James. Okay, and I'm going to, just like we did with the Camden tablet, I'm going to put 2 on a teaspoon, and I'm going to crush them together until they form a powder. Ooh, lost a little bit of it there. Okay, and I need to do 2 more, because again I'm making 2 gallons of wine here. So again, into a powder, in it goes. I'm now going to give it a good stirring. And now what we do is we put this back into our warm room. So this is going to go back into my boiler room at 20 degrees, and we're going to put that in there for a whole week, 7 days. We're not going to touch it. So we'll see you back in a week. 7 days after we added the yeast to our nectarines, it's now time to strain it off and put the nectarine wine into a demijohn to ferment to dryness. But before we do that, I think it's about time you had a proper look at this, and for you to see that making your own wine at home isn't always very pretty. But what is going to come out of this is going to taste absolutely gorgeous. I've transferred the nectarine wine from my fermenting bucket to a secondary bucket just to make my life a little bit easier. The reason for this being is that my straining bag won't fit into this bucket. So what I'm going to do is simply pop the straining bag on. I'm going to put a couple of pegs around the outside. It's going to make my life a little bit easier when trying to keep the bucket in place. And now all I'm going to do is very carefully strain off my nectarines. Nearly said peaches. Oh, lovely, look at all that. That's going to take a little bit of time for all of the juice to finish straining through. So we're going to come back to this in about 10 minutes. I finished letting the nectarines strain into our second bucket, and now it's time to transfer them to our demijohns. And here I'm going to be using 2 demijohns because I've got 2 gallons. And how we're going to transfer it is by simple use of a siphon. All we need to do then is pop it into the nectarine wine in there and then give a good suck. Okay, I'm now going to take the Nectarine wine into my demijohns just to the bottom of the neck, so about here. And it's going to take me a little bit of time to fill both of these. So as soon as I've got it up to the necks, we'll then show you what you need to do next. I finished siphoning off our Nectarine wine into our 2 demijohns, and as you'll see, I've taken it up to the bottom of the neck on both of them. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding a bubbler or an airlock to the top of our demijohn. Now, in the bottom of the bubbler, you'll notice I've put some fluid, and this is sodium metabisulfate solution, the same stuff that we've used to sterilise everything along the way. And all we're going to simply do is pop that in the top. The reason why it's called a bubbler is because this carbon dioxide that the yeast still left in here is going to carry on making, it's going to gradually create bubbles and it's going to bubble on through. So, what happens next? Well, we put this demijohn back into a warm place now for a couple of weeks until it's fermented to dryness. Dryness, by that we mean that all of the sugar has been turned by the yeast into alcohol. So how do we know that it's fermented to dryness? Well, 2 ways. First of all, we're going to notice that no more bubbles are coming through the airlock. Second way is that we use a hydrometer, and our hydrometer reading when we take a sample of this should be pretty much 1 or slightly below, and it should be the same for 3 consecutive days. And if that's the case, then it's probably reached dryness and therefore it's ready for racking off and bottling. Now, racking off and bottling we've covered in one of our other videos, so go and have a look at that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this, both these bottles, and I'm going to pop it into my warm airing cupboard, and then hopefully in a couple of weeks it will have fermented to dryness and then we're ready for racking and bottling.